When you see 107 Schmeichel and 107 Van der Sar side by side, the first reaction is usually, there's no difference. Same overall rating, both elite, both Manchester United legends, two identical walls. But eFootball has a funny way of exposing differences once you stop looking at ratings and start paying attention to what actually happens during matches. The first thing that hits you is that even though they're both rated 107, they are built very differently. Schmeichel is a defensive goalkeeper, Van der Sar is an offensive goalkeeper, and that single difference already shapes everything else before a shot is even taken. Schmeichel wants to stay home, protect the line, and react. Van der Sar wants to be involved, step forward, and prevent danger early. Looking purely at the core goalkeeper stats, Schmeichel immediately stands out for awareness. A 99 goalkeeper awareness is not just a number. It changes how early he reacts to shots and where he positions himself before the ball is struck. In-game, this means Schmeichel often already looks set when the attacker shoots. You rarely catch him mid-movement or leaning the wrong way. He just feels ready. Van der Sar is not far behind with 98 awareness, but that 1-point difference becomes noticeable because of how his playstyle uses that awareness. Instead of sitting deep and reading the shot, his awareness often pulls him higher up the pitch. Sometimes that's helpful, especially when someone tries to slip a pass through the middle. Other times it means he's not perfectly aligned when a sudden shot comes in. Reflexes are where Schmeichel really starts to separate himself. With 98 goalkeeper reflexes, he reacts incredibly fast in close-range situations. In the box, when shots come quickly after a rebound or a deflection, Schmeichel feels alive. You see those sharp hand movements, quick dives, and instinctive saves that don't look flashy but stop goals. These are the saves that don't make highlight reels but win games. Van der Sar also has 98 reflexes, and in isolation that sounds equal, but in gameplay it doesn't always feel the same. His reflexes shine most in structured moments like one-on-ones, where he can step forward and spread himself. In chaotic situations, when shots come from awkward angles or crowded boxes, Schmeichel feels more reliable. Reach is another stat people love to talk about, especially because Van der Sar is taller. On the card, Schmeichel has 97 reach, while Van der Sar has 95. That already tells you something important. Despite being slightly shorter, Schmeichel actually covers more effective space in-game. When shots are aimed toward the corners, especially low and across goal, Schmeichel gets there more often than you expect. It's not just about wingspan, it's about positioning combined with reach, and Schmeichel does that combination better. Parrying is a massive difference between the two, and it's one of those things you only notice after conceding a few frustrating goals. Schmeichel has 97 parrying, Van der Sar has 98, but again, the numbers don't tell the full story. Schmeichel's parries feel controlled. When he can't catch the ball, he usually pushes it wide or out of danger. You don't often see him slap the ball straight back into the middle of the box. Van der Sar, on the other hand, parries more aggressively. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't, the rebound usually falls perfectly for an attacker. Over many matches, those rebound goals start to add up, and that's where frustration creeps in. Catching is another area where Schmeichel quietly does his job better. With 96 catching compared to Van der Sar's 96 as well, you'd expect them to be equal, but Schmeichel simply holds onto more shots. Especially low-driven shots and medium power finishes, Schmeichel tends to grab and kill the play. Van der Sar is more likely to push those shots away, keeping the attack alive. Now let's talk about jump, because this is one of the few physical stats that actually matters for a goalkeeper. Schmeichel has 87 jump, Van der Sar has 81. That difference shows up on crosses, headers, and close-range aerial situations. Schmeichel attacks the ball more confidently in the air. He reaches it earlier, meets it higher, and looks stronger in crowded 6-yard boxes. Van der Sar isn't bad in the air, but he feels more passive. There are moments where you expect him to claim a cross, and he hesitates just enough to make things uncomfortable. Against strong strikers, that hesitation can be costly. Where Van der Sar does shine is in one-on-one situations. His offensive goalkeeper style means he's quicker to come off his line, close angles, and force attackers into rushed decisions. When it works, it looks great. You feel like you've robbed a goal, but the problem is consistency. When he mistimes that movement by even a fraction, the goal is completely exposed. Schmeichel handles one-on-ones differently. He doesn't rush. He waits, stays big, and trusts his reflexes. It might not look as dramatic, but it's safer. You concede fewer silly goals where the goalkeeper commits too early. Over time, that difference becomes huge. Another thing that stands out is how both goalkeepers behave when your defense is under pressure. In messy games where tackles are missed and attackers get half chances, Schmeichel feels like a safety net. He bails you out. Van der Sar feels more like a gamble. Sometimes he bails you out. Sometimes he makes the situation worse by stepping into it. That's not a knock on Van der Sar's quality, it's just how his playstyle interacts with the game engine. eFootball can be unpredictable. Deflections, weird bounces, delayed inputs, all of that favors a goalkeeper who reacts rather than anticipates. Schmeichel is built for that environment. Across multiple matches, different opponents, different playstyles, the pattern becomes clear. Schmeichel doesn't really have bad games. He might not always be spectacular, but he's solid almost every time. Van der Sar has higher highs, but also lower lows. And when you're talking about a goalkeeper, you usually want the opposite. You want stability. You want to trust that your keeper won't cost you a match. Even statistically, when you strip everything down to the goalkeeper fundamentals, awareness, reflexes, reach, catching, parrying, and jump, Schmeichel either matches or beats Van der Sar in most areas. The areas where Van der Sar is equal or slightly better are heavily influenced by his aggressive positioning, which isn't always a positive. By the time you've played enough matches with both, the conclusion doesn't feel forced. It feels natural. Schmeichel is simply the more dependable goalkeeper. He fits more teams, handles more situations, and makes fewer mistakes. Van der Sar is still elite. If you like offensive goalkeepers and you play a high line with disciplined defenders, he can work brilliantly. But for most players, most matches, and most situations, Schmeichel gives you more peace of mind. So when people ask which one is actually better, not on paper, not in theory, but in real eFootball matches, the answer is clear. 107 Schmeichel is the better goalkeeper. Not because of hype, not because of nostalgia, but because when the shots start flying and the game gets messy, he does exactly what a goalkeeper should do: stop goals and stay out of trouble.